All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Q&A with Tech Services. I am Olivia Radcliffe, and I am here with the amazing, incomparable Dan Yasenchak. Dan, you know the deal. What's your intro?
So I am the director of technical services here at EBM Services. I've been here for uh, 20 plus years. So we'll say I have a lot of experience. Um, and that I'm old. And
I wasn't going to say that.
it's okay. We know everybody thought it already. But therefore, hopefully I have some experiences that I can share with everybody. And hopefully you're going to ask me some good questions that lead into that.
I think so. So the today's episode is pretty much on a theme. There's lots of questions out there about how to sterilize gowns, not like ball gowns, like surgical gowns and such.
Okay, very good.
At least I'm assuming they're not ball gowns, but how to sterilize gowns, because this is kind of a bottleneck, I think, in the sterilization world. You need gowns, you need equipment like that, you need all that PPE equipment out and in the hands of consumers, and it can be kind of tricky to sterilize. Do you want to dig into that?
Sure. So I think in a broad sense, gowns, as a level 3 and level 4 gowns are sterilized typically with ETO. And the challenge that exists there in today's world is ETO is really getting looked at by the EPA, and they have new regulations that they have to meet because, well, the way ETO works is it is a carcinogenic gas. So it is kind of the way that it works to go ahead and kill microbes. But therefore, there's a lot of requirements to go ahead and make sure you're containing that. So those companies that are using ETO have had to put in extra environmental controls. And so I think there's been a bit of tightening the supply because some of the smaller places can't necessarily afford those extra emission controls.
Mhm.
So when we go ahead and look at gowns, particularly, well, why are some of the things that maybe they've been ETO treated? Obviously, ETO is kind of the grandfather of sterilization methods. It's been around for a long time. I'm thinking gowns have been around for a long time, so that probably is part of why those have fit together. The other part, I think, for just kind of again a broad industry view is that making a change on something that is kind of I don't call it a commodity because I don't think that's fair, but it's a surgical gown. It's not necessarily the same value as unique medical device at maybe a $5,000 medical device. Don't think gowns are sold for that much. At least I hope not. Next time I need a surgery.
I don't know. I'll have to check my insurance. Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
about right.
So there's to go ahead and make a change comes with a cost, and no one wants to go ahead and make a change. If that cost can't be at least well reasoned. Well, we have to do this. There's an increasing price with ETO. There's cost savings over here with electron beam. Without that kind of economic motivation, I think it's difficult to go ahead and say, oh yeah, we should go ahead and make a change. Why would you want to? I'm going to stop there and I'll let you ask me a question.
Well, okay, so change comes with cost. Why?
So one of the things is there's a regulatory change. So you're going to have to file something with the FDA one way or another when you make a change in sterilization. It's a critical part of the process. So you're going to have to, therefore, have the documentation to give to the FDA saying, I've looked at the effect of sterilization on our product, long term. I've looked at it from is it actually sterilizing the way it's supposed to? I've looked at it for physical compatibility. There's probably a list of, there's probably a dozen tests, that need to happen on gowns. And gowns are, I'm going to say again, a critical safety device, as you would a PPE, for the operating room. So there's, a lot of things that it has to do. If you don't want liquids to go through the gown and get on you. You don't want to go ahead and have the string break, or obviously you don't want it to just fall apart. So
Mhm.
there's all of those things have to be looked at, and they obviously to do the work properly, it comes at a cost. You have to run the experiments. They have to have a validated plan to go ahead and get through all those steps. So um, that's a major cost. And so again, anytime you make a change in sterilization, it's not oh, it's just a resubmittal. It's a $25 application fee. That would be nice. Um,
Mm.
the other portion that would happen here is if you're moving from gowns from a ETO to radiation, talking obviously about E-beam in this case, um, the materials that you're using need to be radiation compatible. So gowns typically have a polypropylene layer, and polypropylene is something that doesn't handle radiation as well without being a radiation stable, radiation grade polypropylene. So that can add some cost, obviously, to the materials. Therefore, if you aren't using that already, so that is definitely a factor and a consideration. It's also part of what makes electron beam the better fit for gowns than say gamma, because gamma has a much more deleterious effect on the polypropylene than E-beam. E-beam being a much quicker process. Uh, well, I would say we can look at if you saw all the polypropylene medical labware that we do on a daily, weekly basis, you'd appreciate that there's a lot of companies driving by their gamma facility to get to us because of the much better results with electron beam versus gamma with polypropylene. An advantage, though, from the cost standpoint is you do have to use Tyvek packaging with ETO. It has to be breathable so you can get the gas in and pull back out, and like that is not needed with electron beam. So you can use a polyethylene pouch, I'm gonna say both faces. So typically what I've seen is they're kind of put into a form fill seal uh, uh, bag, packaging ultimately. And, you don't need to go ahead and use the Tyvek, which is, quite expensive. And,
Mhm.
our estimate would be that that probably counteracts, anything that you need from the cost perspective of the radiation resistant or stable polypropylene. So there's a balance there. But like I said, in the end, there is there's this cost of you have to do all the studies though. You have to go ahead and be able to show that your product is performing the way that it's supposed to.
Mhm. So you mentioned that polypropylene is not necessarily radiation compatible, but you do process a lot of polypropylene materials because it is a faster dose rate with e-beam, right? So there's typically less degradation than you'd see with something like gamma.
Yeah, correct. Much less, we just had a client the 2 weeks ago that had their product that had well, they currently use a gamma supplier. They're looking to switch to us, and we irradiated. We had to call a higher dose range. It's again one of these
Mhm.
of e-beam. So instead of using the 25 to 40 kilogray, we needed a 25 to I believe was a 55 kilogray max dose. And so we did our max dose exposure. It was probably about a 55 to 65 kilogray range on his product, and he came back and and said, oh, these are fantastic. This looks way better than the Gamma, product. It wasn't yellowed. And when he showed us what the Gamma product looked like, was like, well, you're right. This does look a lot better. This is really what you sell. Okay, we weren't that. But there really is a real difference that if you're not aware of it, it is something to to look at or consider for the right products. And again, maybe that's the other portion we can go into with the gowns is, the density of the gowns tends to work pretty well with electron beam, so you can package it in, in a way where we're going to be able to get a reasonable dose range on it. And, achieve, I'm going to say, high throughput, with the truckload capacity that we have. And, and again, in E-beam's particular case, we have, 4 electron beams set up for sterilization at 2 different
Mhm.
locations. 2 electron beams in New Jersey, 2 in Ohio, that all have this capacity that's available for processing, tens of truckloads, on each beam, for each day. So, um, there's, it's a, uh, the ability for us to, go ahead and process that volume is not, not a concern with EV. That's, you can have that throughput.
So, potential packaging changes if you're looking at switching from ETO to E-beam, and maybe potential material changes? Speaking specifically about gowns.
Yeah. So specifically about gowns, the packaging change that you would want to consider is, well, they you absolutely would want to consider is get rid of the tie flange. Lower
Yeah,
your costs.
cheaper. Yeah.
Go ahead and go to, in all polyethylene, packaging, right? It may be able to be boxed the same. It may not. That goes to the specifics of, what is how are the gowns currently packaged for you. But as a whole, they are a fairly, low density product in the, e-beam world of what we would call low density.
Mhm.
So, there's, I'm going to say, real um, likelihood that it may not need to be repackaged, but it's certainly something that we can figure out. I mean, it's certainly not anything that, honestly, that's a roadblock that needs to, stop the show and say, oh, that's not worth, considering. Absolutely, we can do, from what I've seen, the level 3 gowns work very, very well. Level 4 gowns seem to work well too. They're a little bit more dense. Um, so there's a little bit more dose range that might be needed there. But again, I think you're looking at maybe a 2.5-to-1 ratio instead of a 2-to-1 ratio, which is very
Mhm.
typical for EV. So um, again, I think it works just really well, and it's really good fit for particularly our, medium energy electron beams, where they have a lot of kilowatts available, so you can get a lot of throughput. The other unique part that I think exists with gowns is, I believe they have some natural fiber a lot of times maybe in them, and that can cause the bioburden values to be a little bit higher. So
Mm.
having a need for a little bit higher dose, you want a beam that has more kilowatts, and that is part of what, we can offer in that medium energy electron beam world. And so again, it's one of those things that just makes gowns are a really good fit for what we do.
So, thinking back to my time when I was there in tech services, I think one of the questions I got the most often was, what about turnaround time? Because a lot of people, when they were coming from ETO, were used to having quarantine time and all sorts of stuff kind of added onto the end. And I think that was one of the biggest like wow factors was E-beam's turnaround time or their potential. So can you talk a little bit about what that turnaround time actually would look like? Both the validation of products, like getting them, like figuring out if it works, and then
Mhm.
also just routine production.
Yeah, well, and let me answer that backwards. So the routine production, um, the what is it? Our stated turnaround time would be, oh, it's a 1 week turnaround. But when you go ahead and look at what we would want to do with, higher volume customers, it's very much, we want to be able to receive a shipment and, reload that truck and have it go back out. So, have it turn around that way. So it's kind of, if it was a 1 week turnaround, we have 1 week's worth of, inventory in essence in our plant. Well, that could be the case. And every time we process, we ship the product back out. But the
Mm.
other part is we have customers who do same day turnaround. That's the routine process. So um, we have, uh, I'm going to say, our techniques of going ahead and communicating things appropriately. And that's a large part to be really successful at this is the communication. But it's, communicate it. We know the truck's going to arrive tomorrow morning, by 5 a.m. We can go ahead and have it checked in. When the shift starts, we're starting processing on that right away. And it's out, at by 11 o'clock, so it's very quick. go through the whole paperwork, get the dosimetry results so it can be released and certified that it got the dose it was supposed to go, and you have a sterile shipment, on your way. So those are both, I'm going to say, options that, again, it's work with us, and we can work with a way to go ahead and find the best fit there. From the qualification standpoint, like I said, there's a number of tests that have to be done. So probably the long, item in the whole portion of requalification or qualifying a new method of sterilization is really the long-term testing. So it's make the change to the packaging, meaning the actual pouch itself with that, primary sterile barrier, and have us do the max dose exposure, feasibility exposure at those higher dose levels and get that started on testing. That exposure, I mean, it's a 1 week turnaround for that. So that's not a long period of time. It's unfortunately a lot longer while you wait for testing results for 1, 2, 3 months, 6 months, or whatnot. The other testing that has to be done is, we will have to go through the, we would use, ISO 11137. So there'd be, validating sterilization dose, and verifying what that is. And then that in itself may be like a 2-week process. And then the final part is ultimately the qualification at the case level, where we would be placing dosimeters throughout the case. So we know what production settings we give the product in order to get the minimum dose that's needed and not exceeding the max.
Mhm.
So that the dose mapping, the way we would break that down normally is we'll qualify initial beam and then the second beam. And then, if it's a high volume, we'll qualify the other 2 beams at the other facility. But that first beam may be 2 weeks or so. So that you would already have results and have good evidence that we're going to be successful in doing it, because that is the reality of electron beam. Is the dose maps aren't quite as I'm going to say unexciting as gamma. Those small variations in density do matter with electron beam, and so that's part of what we have to be aware of. And that's again part of what we want to do is again have those conversations and be able to qualify a range that's appropriate for your product.
Makes sense. So all in all, it seems like it is a relatively quick turnaround time to get stuff in the door, validated and ready for production.
We've gone through those 3 steps within 4 weeks for a number of customers over the years. Normally the issue is much more of those other tests. So there normally isn't a reason to go ahead and go quite that fast unless they already have some data that says, hey, yeah, we can do this. And we already know some long-term testing results. But yeah, so it can be, I'm going to say, what we would consider a fairly fast turnaround, and you can do a lot of those steps in parallel. So again, you can kind of really condense that schedule if you want to.
Yeah. How much product do you need for the validation portion of it?
In the end, if we're qualifying a single facility, we would qualify both electron beams at that facility for doing the sterilization. For the dose mapping and material testing, realistically, you're looking at probably about 4 cases or so that you would need, 3 for the dose mapping portion and another one for material feasibility. And you might need, depending on how many units are in a case, a 5th one for the dose verification. But it gives you kind of a sense as to what might be needed.
Yeah. Just in case anyone was kind of thinking they needed to get started and how much product they needed to pull aside.
And it's a great question, because a lot of times with ETO, you have to you have to have the volume to qualify the ETO chamber. With E-beam, it doesn't work that way. We're really qualifying kind of at the case level, and makes it a little bit quicker, a little bit more simple.
And then the other question I used to get all the time, it's probably still the most common question, pricing. And I know that it's very particular because it is, there's so many differences between products, between what they need and everything. What can you share about people who are interested in pricing?
Yeah, so we've done some math on gowns and in sizes that we've seen. And again, there's a little bit of a difference of a level 3 versus 4, and some of the densities and I think how they can be packaged. But it's very much a 13 to 16 cents per gown, range is what we're working in. And that's we haven't seen anything contrary to that thus far in our work with gown manufacturers.
Perfect. Okay. That was a much tighter range than I was expecting you to be able to give. So that was that was great. But any last minute bits of wisdom? I think we kind of jammed it in a nutshell there. So any other last minute bits of wisdom for people?
Very consolidated. I mean, like I said, I think it's really, if you're interested in it, well, you've just heard a price. You've heard how long qualification takes. The biggest thing is, getting the data on, irradiated material. So, I mean, I think it's very much get started with material feasibility, if there's that interest. So you can get that, kind of clock ticking as far as, the shelf life and the like. So, certainly interested if you have an interest in having a conversation with you. So I'm sure you'll give us all of the contact information, right, Olivia?
Of course, of course. If you are interested in learning more about sterilizing gowns or, anything else in general, you can go ahead and reach out to Dan and the tech services team. Fastest way is probably on the website, ebeamservices.com. There's a handy contact form on there. And you can also reach out if you have any other questions that you want anyone to answer on Q&As like this. We love just answering what actually people are asking out there. So yeah, that's a good one. So yeah, you can fill that out on the website as well, ebeamservices.com, or shoot us an email, ebeam@ebeamservices.com. All right. Take care.
Thank you.